Okay, so for this lecture and this video is really about what we are going to be doing for most of second quarter, and that's talking about culture. Now, before we start talking about food and music and holidays and all kinds of stuff that go along with culture, we really need to answer the question, what is culture, what is the definition, and how is it created? I'm going to go ahead and apologize now for the audio. I've been playing around with it, and unfortunately in some places it's really loud. Please make sure that after you are done watching this video and you've written down all your notes, that you go ahead and edit those notes by either highlighting keywords and definitions, using the red pen to highlight anything that you think is really important, so probably the two most important things. And then if you need to add something or something you need to learn more about or ask questions about, you can use the blue or purple pen for that. So before we do that, let's go ahead and let's write down our essential questions. So remember, we're going to answer this question in our summary at the end of the video. And our essential question is, what are the key ideas of culture and how does it work? Okay, so remember, if you don't have enough time to write stuff down as the video goes, remember you can just go ahead and pause it and you can get caught up with that. So now that hopefully you've had the essential question written, let's go to our first slide. So the first thing that we need to talk about is, what is culture? So before we can do that, we got to go ahead and come up with our definition of culture. So the definition that we are going to use for culture is the behavior of a group of people. So the definition of culture is the behavior of a group of people. So this isn't just how a group of people act, it's so many things that include things like religion, food, music, language, social habits, and so much more. So when it says up there social habits, one of the biggest things that I noticed that when I lived in Japan is that here in the US, when people sneeze, they normally say bless you. And that has a big cultural thing that's related to diseases. When you would sneeze, they'd think maybe you were sick and it could be bad off for you. But in Japan, they've never had that. So that's a social habit they don't have. And that largely comes from not having that emphasis for coughing in their culture. All right, so let's go ahead and let's go to our next slide. So the thing that we need to ask ourselves is, what creates culture? So how is culture created? And what we need to know is that culture is created as a reaction to the environment. So things that we eat, religious beliefs, all those things are reaction to the environment. Now, when we say environment, we aren't just talking about climate, we're not talking about seasons, we're not talking about weather or geography, we're talking about a lot of other things. This could include vegetation, and it could also include history as well. So the history of a place could also impact our culture. So it's really important for us to remember that when we say environment, it's so many different things that are happening, and all of those things, all that stuff that's going around in the environment, that is what creates culture. So moving on, when we talk about what creates culture and we have culture and we're looking at it, we need to remember that culture is like an iceberg. Now, when you see an iceberg and you're on top in a ship, you might see it, it might look really big, but the thing is that we only see a small portion of it. There's this huge part that's hidden or that's working underneath the surface. And so sometimes when we look at a culture or we're looking at something, maybe it's food or music, we might only see the very tip of what created that or why it's important. When in reality, there might be all this other stuff below the surface that we might have to look at and study to really understand more about that item as it relates to a particular culture. And this could be with a variety of things as well. Okay, now that we've kind of mentioned that culture is like an iceberg, and sometimes when we look at it very briefly or even from a glance, without studying in depth, we may only see the top, but there might be all this other stuff, this huge part of this cultural item as it relates to a group of people that we may not see until we study it. And so now what we really need to look at and talk about is something that can be positive, but it could also have a negative consequence as well. And that's defining people based on their culture. And unfortunately, we live in a society where we do this all the time. Now, when we say that we are defining people based on culture, there is a positive aspect. And really what this allows us to do is have a general understanding. And when we say a general understanding, it means in very broad, generic terms, it gives us an idea about a group of people and who they are. And so that's one way that when we're defining people based on culture, it can give us a general idea of who they are and what they represent. But at the same time, there's also a danger. And part of that danger is that it can go ahead and create a stereotype. Now, I know with Ms. Zelvey, you guys talked a little bit about stereotypes by watching the TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. When if we don't really understand, or if we take a view and we apply it to everything, it can create issues. And that's one of the problems is when we define people based on a single culture is we create up with these things that are not representative of people and their culture. And it doesn't represent them, and it creates a stereotype. And so here is a great example, especially as we get to Halloween, but the sexy, Native American dress. When in reality, this is so far different. I'll go back. This is so far different from what this young woman who's a Hopi, the ceremonial dress she's wearing. And instead, what we do is we create this stereotype, and we do something very negative to somebody's culture, and that we create this image, or we create these items. And it's important for us as we go out through the rest of this quarter in the year, as we look at things like holidays people celebrate, as we look at the food they eat, the music they listen to, all kinds of stuff, the superheroes they have, we need to make sure that we are not going into looking at these people and their cultural items having that stereotype. We need to try to look beyond what we see at the top of that iceberg and look beneath, so that way we could have a better understanding of their culture and these people. Okay, so that is it for this lecture or this video. So please go ahead and make sure you edit your notes, highlight those key definitions or important terms, maybe with the red pen, underline one or two things that you need, and then make sure that you answer the essential question in your summary. Okay, so thank you so much. If you have questions, please touch base with me and I will clear anything that is not clear. Thanks.